So with that in mind, let's talk about recent market trends. I mean, it's probably a pretty confusing time for people. It certainly is for me. Every time I pick up the newspaper, the data and the stories are a bit all over the place. And this is one of the examples that I like to share. This is a screenshot from the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago, where you literally have on one side of the screen discussions about how CIOs are hiring more AI researchers, how they need to ship more apps, how there's a lot of pressure to have them grow their teams and execute. And literally, two articles over, the IT job market is shrinking. So is this good news? Is this bad news? What's going on, right? It's so difficult to tell. And so I want to start with the technology sector itself. Of course, the news here, again, tends to be more negative than positive lately. There's layoffs. I mean, Meta just announced another 10,000 layoffs the other day. We've heard about Microsoft. We've heard about Amazon. We hear about, I mean, even Silicon Valley Bank and the challenges there might bleed over into hiring strategies in the long run. The IT job market is shrinking, but even here, even with these headlines, we see such an interesting, I'm going to say dichotomy, because the subheadline for the IT job market piece is that information technology chiefs say competition for talent remains fierce. So what's going on? Are they hiring? Are they not? What are they looking for, and how do we stand out? And of course, the last piece that I will mention on this topic from a negative perspective is the actual numbers that we see. There are more layoffs happening now than before. This is a screenshot from a chart at layoffs.fyi that tracks both companies and employees laid off. And so, of course, there's been a pretty significant uptick from mid-2022 into 2023. And so as a result of this, can be really easy to be depressed right now, or certainly demotivated and uncertain in terms of what's going on. But I want to present the case for optimism. There's also a lot of really good things going on, and there's certainly a lot of silver linings to appreciate and to look for. So when it comes to the optimistic side of things, first, we're all very data-driven people, so I want to share some metrics just to give us an idea of like, where do we stand if we forget the noise, if we forget the headlines and the scare tactics that are sometimes used in these articles. So first, from a labor statistics perspective, the economy is actually doing fairly well when it comes to unemployment and when it comes to people finding jobs. When you compare January 2023 to January 2020, the numbers are actually very, very similar. The unemployment rate, in fact, is lower today in Canada, and in Ontario, it's pretty much the same. The participation rates are pretty much the same, and the employment rates are actually a little higher. So when we look at it from this perspective, from like pure data, pure jobs, forgetting tech or IT specifically right now, people are finding work and companies are actually hiring. In fact, there is a lot of difficulty with finding great candidates or candidates at all for certain roles. The other thing that's really, really important here is really thinking about yourself in terms of your job prospects. And the job prospects are good. That's the other thing to keep in mind. Research across the board, whether it's surveys or interviews with candidates or early career professionals, what we're finding within these research projects is that career stability is similar today to earlier generations. When people are laid off, they find jobs quickly. When they do find jobs, they actually do stick around for a while. It's not the sort of thing that every 6 months we're looking for new jobs or trying to find new opportunities. And of course, even within the headlines and within the articles themselves, when we talk to technology companies and non-technology companies that are hiring data and AI researchers, there is a lot of competition for talent, and people are desperate to find those AI researchers and those data professionals to actually get them on board and to hire them. And what's even more positive, and certainly makes me really optimistic, is that this is expected to be the case for the next several years. When we look at projections from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or Statistics Canada, we see that there's 4 job categories that are expected to be in demand more than anything else in the next several years. The research goes up till about 2031 based on the census. Data scientists are number one. Number two, computer and information systems managers, database architects, database administrators. So these are all job titles, obviously very broad, and we'll be talking a little bit more about how to really dig through this. But these are the jobs that are growing, that continue to grow today, are expected to grow for the next several years. And so if you are starting a career in this space today, you should probably be very, very optimistic, even if the headlines might make you a little bit nervous. So, we might be a little nervous, a little sweaty, but at the same time, I think we should be really excited about the future and about what it means for our careers. And that is the case for optimism that I want to present. And that is how I approach literally every single one-on-one session that I work on with folks, and every single conversation that I have with employers. And it is consistent with my own experience, certainly. So what I do want to do then is discuss a few points based on this. If if we can be a little more optimistic, if there is still this competition for talent, then how do we actually manage ourselves, as individuals? Because again, it's easy to see the high level metrics, but what does it mean to you or for you today, right now, when you're applying for jobs or when you're looking for opportunities? So there's 5 key points that I want to bring up here, and I'll go through each of these. The first, it's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be a little uncomfortable right now. A lot of people are. And people are stressed out because of inflation. They're stressed out because of money. They're stressed out because of these headlines. And in fact, based on the research that we're doing, one of the things that is very consistent when it comes to the kind of the negative side of the metrics is that people are pessimistic. So even though the metrics are actually not so bad, and even though people are finding work pretty quickly, even in cases where they're laid off, what is consistent and consistently negative is people's fears and people's pessimism. And so that's not to say that's wrong. I just want to bring that up because if you're feeling this way, you're not alone. And so talk to a friend, talk to a counselor, talk to a mentor. It's okay to get that off your chest, and in fact, you should. The other thing that's common today, unfortunately, and what is causing a lot of the stress is that people are applying for more jobs. So people are finding work, and people are finding great, interesting, and starting great, interesting careers. But what is changing today, even versus, I would say, a year ago, is the number of applications they're sending out. And this is a bit of an unfortunate negative feedback loop, because the more applications someone sends, the more recruiters have to review those applications, the faster they have to do it, the more coarse they are in terms of actually reviewing them. So they send more no's, obviously. As a result of that, people get more no's, they panic, they apply to more jobs, right? And so again, if you are actually going through this process and you've sent out 3 or 4 applications and you haven't heard back, that's okay. Don't worry. Keep going, and certainly don't give up. And at the same time, if you're sending 10, 20, 30 applications, that's also not uncommon today. It is what unfortunately is happening. And so while I will say bear with it, there are also strategies to deal with it, which we'll be talking about. And one of the things that I will say that's really, really important, and very few people do from this perspective, is benchmarking yourself. We're all data-driven data professionals in this webinar. And what I'm always surprised about is when data-driven people take a non-data-driven approach to some of these processes. What I recommend is that when you do start applying, log all the applications and keep them in mind. If you're going to apply for 20 jobs potentially, especially if they're easy, one-click LinkedIn applies, there's a very good chance you'll forget that you applied to certain roles. And so keep track of the roles you've applied for, and then track where things are dropping off. So is it that you're submitting applications and you're not hearing back at all? Is it that you're getting on a recruiter phone screen and the recruiters aren't moving you forward to the hiring manager? Is it that you're actually getting all the way through the technical interviews, but you're not getting the final offer? All of these challenges require different strategies for you in terms of how you would address them. And from a benchmarking perspective, just some numbers that we're seeing today, especially given the 25 plus application piece that I mentioned. If you're submitting applications and you're getting more than 10 or 20% responses to those initial applications, so a recruiter or someone calls you to do a phone screen, that's pretty good. That's a good place to be. If you're at like 1 or 2% or you're getting 0 responses, then there's a good chance that you might need to work on your resume, or maybe the jobs that you're applying for aren't quite the right ones in relation to your resume or your skill set. If you are getting through and actually going to the final stages or the interviews, there's a good chance that 25 to 33% is the conversion rate to actually get a job offer. And again, you'll notice it's not 100%, it's not 99%. You might still have to do a few sets of interviews before you get that offer. Now, again, here, if you're not getting any offers, you might want to do some mock interviews. You might want to do some role playing to really see where things are falling apart. Maybe you're not communicating well. Maybe you're not passing the coding challenges, or again, whatever else might be happening within the interview process. The other thing to keep in mind is strategizing around who is hiring. Again, a year ago, if we were doing this webinar, or when we were doing webinars like this, everyone was asking about how they work for the FANGs, right? Meta, Amazon, Google, etc. This is changing quite a bit right now from a hiring perspective. And there's a few axes that I want to bring up here. The first is tech versus non-tech. Now, I want to emphasize, you are a technology and data professional, right? So you will be doing technology and data work regardless of where you go, but the companies you apply for could be non-technology ones. A lot of the fast growth, unprofitable tech companies today have actually significantly reduced their hiring, but a lot of non-technology companies, retailers, travel companies, airlines, financial services firms, banks are actually very actively hiring, and they're struggling quite a bit with regards to actually finding again, data and AI professionals to fill their roles. So that's one strategy you could take, is look for those quote unquote non-tech firms and apply there. The second is startups versus established corporations. I use the term startup here very loosely. What I really mean is, again, those fast growth, unprofitable companies, particularly ones that depend on venture capital to fuel their hiring plans or enable their hiring plans. There is a slowdown there in many ways relative to a year or 2 years ago. But again, larger established corporations that are profitable or doing well from a financial perspective are very actively hiring, again, particularly within the data, AI, and technology space more broadly. In fact, I would say some of them even see this slowdown as a bit of an opportunity to potentially leverage or hire talent that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. And finally, I also want to distinguish between IT and AI data. This is another thing. A lot of the articles that I showed you earlier on are talking about technology, about IT, right? That's a really, really, really broad space. And AI data is actually a significantly small chunk of that broader IT hiring landscape. And so even the distinction there is really important, because if you're sort of like a junior manager or middle manager within IT, your job prospects, again, I would say are still pretty good, but probably not as good as, let's say, an AI researcher or data professional who is specifically working on cutting edge research or comfortable with cutting edge research. So what do you do if you're focusing on non-tech corporations, AI data, and frankly, what do you do in general if you're looking for work here? What are some of the things that you might be able to leverage? We're going to talk about these in more detail throughout the webinar, but I do want to quickly sort of summarize them. Hybrid data science roles are really important and becoming more and more important. So this is where you are a data scientist, but you also do something else. You're a finance professional that knows how to do machine learning. You're someone who has a biotechnology background and you want to work for a biotech startup, but you also understand how AI works. This combination of skills makes you really rare and makes you an extremely interesting candidate for specific firms and specific companies. The second is emphasizing niche skills. 10 years ago, it was okay to put AI on your resume and people would say, hey, that's pretty cool. 3 or 4 years ago, it might have been NLP or computer vision. today you need to get more and more specific because these terms have become so broad and they've become so general that people don't really know what they mean anymore when you say you're an expert in those areas. Also, one of the themes that comes up a lot right now and will come up several times in this webinar is this that specificity implies expertise. So when you tell someone you're good at natural language processing, for example, they have to take your word for it. If you tell them that you're good at reinforcement learning with human feedback in large language models, then that statement alone implies that you know at least what's going on in the cutting edge of NLP, and I can assume that you certainly have some capabilities there. Third, ride waves. There's a lot of topics that are getting a lot of attention right now. Generative AI, prompt engineering, GPT-4 yesterday. All of these things are things that employers are really nervous about. They're certainly very curious about. And so if you are capable or comfortable working in these spaces, make sure you bring that up in your resume. And finally, soft skills. As AI becomes more and more pervasive within industry, businesses are realizing that it's not just about throwing a bunch of technology experts at a problem. It's also about cultural change. It's about leadership. It's about communication. So all of these things, if you have those soft skills, if you're comfortable with product management, for example, you will stand out if you emphasize those soft skills. And frankly, there are jobs now, which again, we'll be talking about later in this webinar, that really focus on those soft skills rather than the hard tech that we were used to 5 years ago with an AI. Now, when it comes to keeping up with these skills, there's no right answer here, and there's certainly, this isn't meant to be a chart of the skills that you should be learning today. But what I do want to emphasize is as you explore those niche skills, as you ride those waves that I was just mentioning, what you want to do is have a strategy where you're constantly learning and updating your capabilities. For example, if you're really focused on natural language processing, the kind of yellow bucket of skills here might be relevant. Learning what prompt engineering is, getting comfortable with large language models, even focusing or reading papers around things like reinforcement learning with human feedback are all examples of skills or technologies that you might want to pick up today that will make you a very unique and special candidate because so few people have it. If you're more on the ML ops side, this could be vector databases or federated learning or even privacy engineering, things that are really difficult for companies today because they're so bleeding edge. But this doesn't have to be limited to the technical side, right? Data visualization, if you know Streamlit, or if you're comfortable with no-code tools or even training people on no-code tools and citizen development, great opportunity. If you studied politics or public policy, government relations, AI ethics are topics right now that a lot of companies are struggling with, whether it's because of antitrust risk, because the specific technologies they're launching are within regulated environments or something else. So what I really encourage you to do is, maybe on an annual basis, certainly right now as you're kicking off your career, do a skills audit. Ask yourself if the skills you have and the skills you present in your resume align with the jobs that you are interested in or that you're applying for. If the answer is no, then how do you pick up those skills and how do you learn them? And again, one example that I'll emphasize here, I focus quite a bit on natural language processing myself, which is why there's so many examples for that. But what I do want to emphasize is that idea of specificity. A lot of these spaces, whether it's computer vision, natural language processing, whether it's machine learning ops or auto ML or something else, they're getting more and more specific. And so you have to get more specific as well. So this means NLP becomes large language models, becomes reinforcement learning, et cetera. And again, this will be different for every single person, and your strategy might be different, but you want to move down to the right side of the spectrum, certainly. So what are some of the ways that you might be able to maintain these skills? Personal projects are one. I find sometimes what people will do is they will, let's keep using the large language model example. They'll say, okay, well, I haven't really kept up to date with this stuff. My NLP skills are maybe a few years out of date. Take a weekend, go to Coursera or Kaggle or Hugging Face or whichever YouTube potentially, and build a project. Learn how to use those new technologies just so that you get a feeling for them. You don't have to do anything overly complex, but at least you become aware of what's happening and what's changing. Micro credentials and one-off courses are a lot more popular now. Even in some cases, just one-off lectures where watching that, lecture 7 from a certain course about a certain topic that you want to learn about is a great way to do this. and actively doing this is really, really important. It actually surprises me. A lot of professional industries, whether you're a doctor or a lawyer, have regular workshops to upskill and train people in the latest developments within those spaces. AI hasn't quite gotten there yet, and certainly subfields of AI haven't necessarily gotten there. So you have to really go out of your way sometimes to do this on your own. The other thing that's really important here is how you present your skills. This is the concept of skills versus, let's say, past jobs, I think, is becoming more and more relevant to a lot of people. Have a list of specific skills in your resume. You could, for example, a lot of people tell me they're good at Python. And again, Python is so broad. Are you good at writing the code? Are you good at data visualization? Are you good at rapid prototyping? I don't really know. But if you tell me that you're really good at Streamlit and related packages, then I know that you're following the latest data visualization trends. If you tell me you're really good at PyTorch, then I know that you're following some of the deep learning aspects, and that, again, you're good at Python, but you're good at a few other things as well. Within resumes specifically, make sure you bold those skills and emphasize them within your past experiences so that we can contextualize them. So if a recruiter sees that, hey, you're good at PyTorch and Streamlit, that's great. But if you tell me that the last job you had, you were specifically visualizing financial data using Streamlit, that tells me a lot more about who you are and what you're capable of. The other thing that I would discourage you from doing is don't score yourself on your resume. Sometimes I see resumes where people say, hey, I'm a 5 out of 5 on Python and a 3 out of 5 on C++. I have no idea what these scores mean. The only thing they do, because by the way, they're subjective, right? You made them up. The only thing they do is they make me doubt your C++ capabilities. And I also find the people who use these sort of scores tend to be really hard on themselves. So get rid of them. You can qualify a lot of these things when you're going through the interview process. And of course, I'm assuming the skills you're putting on there are skills you do truly know and understand. And one thing you want to avoid is this idea of skill spam. We're seeing this more and more. People put as many skills as possible on their resumes. And again, it's not really about quantity. What you want to do is tell a good story and focus on the quality of your skills and your capabilities. So what I'll talk about for the next few minutes is standing out. So far, we've been chatting quite a bit about what are the different trends and how do you leverage them. Specifically now, let's say you do have that resume, you're starting to reach out to employers. How do you do a good job? And I do notice also that a few people have submitted questions. If you do have questions, please submit them. I will address them after this session, and we'll have some time before we move to the panel discussion as well, potentially. And if not, I'll make sure, or I'll do my best, I should say, to bring them up in the panel discussion as well. So please keep them coming. I will definitely be reviewing them shortly. Okay, so standing out. First, we've run a lot of webinars with the Vector Institute on standing out. Here are a few links that are very, very relevant. They're all on the Vector Institute YouTube channel: how to accelerate your career, nuances around hybrid career trajectories, acing data and AI interviews. Again, depending where you're struggling or where things are difficult when you're building out that application CRM, you might want to watch different aspects or different parts of these webinars, but I do encourage you to visit them because there's several hours of really great content here. However, AI is changing. A lot of these webinars were also recorded during the COVID lockdowns. And so what I do want to talk about is what's changed over the last year and what is likely to change in the coming months for you to, again, really put your best foot forward. First, video is becoming more and more prevalent. And what I recommend here is if you're putting together projects, portfolios, or applying to places, put your best foot forward and make sure the channel or the medium you're using to promote yourself is aligned with what's actually most relevant to you. So if you're talking about data visualization and you're really good at it, don't write about it. Show me a data visualization. If you want to be an AI transformation consultant or a management consultant focused on AI, you're going to be doing a lot of client presentations. Maybe you should just record a 60-second introduction of yourself. Right off the bat, I will see you can present well, you speak confidently, and that will tell me way more than anything in your resume about how you can present yourself. Practice with video. People often do not actually use video until their first interview. And this is really difficult because you're not used to using video. Maybe you're not used to seeing yourself on screen. And so what I recommend here is do sample problems or short presentations by yourself. Just get a free account on Google Hangouts or Zoom or whatever. Record yourself, go to dinner, take a nap, come back. Once you've lost the context, rewatch the video and see if you still feel good about your presentation and critique yourself. Finally, be comfortable with video interviews. More interviews are being recorded today than before. And at the same time, sometimes companies are actually asking you to pre-record your answers or presentations so that they can be watched asynchronously. Unfortunately, this is the reality of the situation. Be comfortable with it if it does happen to you. Next, portfolios. Portfolios are getting more complex. And this is something again that comes up a lot. People are very skeptical about how much time they have to put into portfolios. I'll share some data later that shows just how important they are. But what I want to bring up now is really put effort into having like 1 or 2 projects that emphasize your capabilities and avoid standardized ones. 3 years ago, having an NLP portfolio where you talk about sentiment analysis of tweets, for example, was very common and worked really well. Today, I could literally download a GitHub repository that builds all of that for me. So it's becoming less and less. It stands out less and less in some cases. And the other thing that I want to ensure here is review projects regularly as a result. And also, 1 great project beats 10 mediocre ones. If you're throwing a lot of simple projects onto your portfolio, what you might want to do instead is take the time to build something really complex end-to-end, because end-to-end projects are hard to find. And also finding employees that are good at taking a project from inception through to completion is really, really difficult. So invest time in projects in this way. Finally, edit your resume, edit for conciseness, edit for active language and active voice. I love using ChatGPT to run edits on this stuff. It's a great way to play around with some cool AI tools while actually improving your resume, which is awesome. And again, niche skills, niche software, better than broad stuff, but avoid skill spam. And of course, customize your resume to your applications, particularly your dream jobs. If there's certain roles that you're really, really excited about, make sure your resume is customized to those roles. Now, I mentioned people tend to be skeptical when I present this stuff. They say, do employers actually review my courses? Do they review my portfolio, or is it just about the resume? Is it just about getting through that first filter? And there's a lot of studies out there and surveys coming up that actually try to figure this out, particularly given some of the talent shortages in the space. And what I want to emphasize here is the 68%. So this is a survey from SAS that specifically interviewed and surveyed hiring managers, and 68% of hiring managers said that case studies and project work is the method they use to evaluate potential employees. Now, that's 2/3 of hiring managers. It's more than the number of hiring managers that call out degrees from academic institutions, right? Like, these portfolios are so important. The reason people, I think, are skeptical is because they don't have portfolios that are specific to the roles they're applying for, or they're doing some of the kind of the simpler projects where they're not really they don't really stand out that much. So really, if there's one piece of advice that I could give here, that like if you remember nothing else, it would be really try and invest in those end-to-end projects, emphasize them, practice communicating them, so that people, hiring managers, recruiters, et cetera, really see how valuable your skill set is and how it could translate to you working at whichever company you're applying for. Finally, within all of this, the other thing that's really changing is networking. Networking is becoming more and more important. I mean, it's always been important, but I would say more important now even than before. And also the way we network is changing because so much of it is going on, and it's a bit of a hybrid networking scenario now, right? There's in-person events, there's also LinkedIn and other places. So the first thing I recommend for people doing is that if there are specific jobs you're interested in, reach out to people that are hiring managers or experts in the field, and specifically ask for the 10-minute meeting. What I mean by a 10-minute meeting is reach out to them via LinkedIn, email, whatever works. Let them know that you're interested in maybe working with them or applying for a job with them in some form, or maybe you just simply want to follow in their footsteps from a career perspective, and ask them if they are willing to share advice or feedback for 5 or 10 minutes. The reason that number here is important is that a lot of hiring managers will get lots of invitations for coffees or events or whatever else. They'll literally get like an invitation for an hour-long coffee. Now the thing is, you're going to have to travel for that coffee. You're going to have to sit down. It might take over an hour. This is really asking for like a 2-hour commitment for a quick chat, right? And a lot of people can't do that, and so they just ignore those asks. But 10 minutes on a call, you can do that while you're commuting from home or from home or to work. And at the same time, it's so much easier. It's a very low barrier. So I do recommend this, and I also recommend really emphasizing what you could get out of it. So suppose that you're Lisa, and suppose that you are specifically interested in working in MLOps and healthcare. Finding hiring managers that are already working in that space and reaching out saying, look, I'm a recent graduate with a specialization in healthcare. I spent the last 6 months working on data visualization and search tools for healthcare data. Here's a sample project that I've done on my portfolio. And you could see how important the specific projects are when you're emphasizing them this way. I'm hoping to get your advice around starting a career in ML engineering and eventually working with a team like yours. You'll notice I'm not saying I want a job. I'm not, or Lisa isn't saying she wants a job. Lisa isn't saying that she is sending her resume and wants an interview. She's simply looking for some advice. And what's really beautiful about this too is that 10-minute call. If things go well, there's a good chance that someone like Martin might recommend specific jobs for her or specific opportunities. And of course, only do this if they're legitimate asks, right? You don't want to be reaching out to people just because they seem to be hiring for a lot of roles. You actually want to build a strong connection with the people themselves. And even if it doesn't convert into a job posting right away or a job opportunity right away, that's okay. It might in 6 months, or they might introduce you to other opportunities later. The other thing that I do want to bring up is in-person events. In-person is back. A year ago, this was not the case. I know that sometimes people are still a bit uncomfortable with in-person, but I do encourage you to get out there and meet people face to face. It's certainly quicker and a lot easier. That 10-minute networking ask that I mentioned can be done without a LinkedIn outreach by literally going to a person at an event and talking to them for 5 minutes and getting their feedback and advice, right? That saves a lot of time, saves a lot of energy, particularly if you are really focused and specific with the events that you're attending. And Vector has a lot of great ones that I'll mention at the end of this webinar as well, but definitely get out to those if you can.